They thought they could steal what wasn't theirs. The HOA, blinded by greed and arrogance, built 35 brand new homes on land they didn't own. My land. At first, I stayed silent, watching as they celebrated, as if I had no power. But every wall they raised, every nail they hammered, only pushed me closer to a decision I could never take back. Because beneath their shiny new neighborhood, hidden in plain sight, was the one thing they never expected me to control: the dam. And when I finally opened it, everything changed. The question is, how far would you go when your entire life is stolen? When I first moved into this quiet community, I thought I had finally found peace. The land stretched wide and open, with tall trees that swayed in the wind and a creek that shimmered in the afternoon sun. My family and I built our home here with our own hands, working late into the evenings, pouring every bit of sweat and hope into creating a place that truly felt like ours. Neighbors waved, kids played along the sidewalks, and for a while, everything seemed perfect. It wasn't a mansion, and it wasn't flashy, but it was ours, safe, steady, and untouched by the chaos of the outside world. But perfection never lasts. Slowly, I began to notice the shifts. Meetings in the community center that I wasn't invited to. Flyers posted about standards and rules that no one had ever mentioned before. A handful of people with too much time on their hands began calling themselves a board. And before long, the HOA was born. At first, I brushed it off. They wanted new fences, new paint colors, trimmed lawns, nothing that concerned me. After all, my land stretched further than theirs, and I wasn't part of their plans. Or so I thought. At first, the HOA's presence felt like nothing more than background noise. A few letters in the mailbox, the occasional reminder to maintain community standards. But those letters soon turned into warnings, and the warnings into fines. They claimed my grass was too wild, even though my property sat far outside their neat little rows of cookie-cutter homes. They said my driveway wasn't in compliance because I didn't pave it with the exact material they dictated. Every week, a new notice appeared, each one angrier than the last, and each one with a threat attached: pay up or face consequences. I refused. My land was older than their subdivision, older than their HOA, older than their bylaws scribbled in fine print. But my refusal only fueled their arrogance. They began sending inspectors to walk my property, clipboards in hand, jotting down everything they could use against me. I'd catch them standing at the edge of my fields, snapping photos of my barn, of my vehicles, even of my family as we worked outside. It didn't feel like oversight anymore. It felt like surveillance, like they were circling, waiting for me to make one wrong move, so they could strike. Then came the lawsuits. Thin envelopes stuffed into my mailbox claiming I owed thousands in unpaid fees. They argued that because I lived within the borders of their community, I was automatically subject to their rules, whether I signed anything or not. I hired lawyers, but the HOA had their own, ruthless attorneys who lived to bury people like me in paperwork and debt until they surrendered. What was worse, the HOA members treated it like a game. At their meetings, they laughed about making an example out of me. They didn't just want compliance. They wanted control. Their reach extended further every month. One morning, I found construction markers staked deep into my land, bright orange flags dotting across the fields I had cleared and cultivated. When I confronted the workers, they told me they were just following orders from the board. The HOA claimed my acreage was unutilized space that would be better served as part of their development. I stood there stunned, realizing this wasn't about lawns, fences, or community harmony anymore. They were planning to take it, to carve up the land I had poured my life into and build their empire on top of it. I tried to fight back the normal way. I went to their meetings, stood at their podium, and demanded answers. Every time, they silenced me. They cut off my speaking time, drowned me out with procedural rules, and smirked as if the outcome had been decided long before I walked through the door. And it had been. Behind closed doors, they had already approved the project. 35 new homes, built on my land. The sight of the first foundation being poured was like a knife twisting in my chest. Heavy machinery rolled across my fields, flattening the soil I had worked for years to nurture. Trucks lined up, unloading lumber, concrete, and workers in bright vests who didn't care whose land they were on. To them, it was just another job site. But to me, it was everything. My legacy, my family's home, and it was slipping away under the weight of greed and arrogance. Still, I refused to give them the satisfaction of watching me break. I stayed silent, biding my time, watching as they built house after house on land that was never theirs to claim. Neighbors who once waved at me now avoided eye contact, afraid to be seen taking my side. And the HOA grew bolder with every victory, as if daring me to act, daring me to push back. But what they didn't realize was that beneath all their construction, beneath the polished wood and perfect paint jobs, there was something older, something more powerful than any rulebook or bylaw they could throw at me. At the edge of my property sat the dam, a structure built decades ago to control the creek that ran through the valley. I had always maintained it quietly, making sure the water stayed calm and steady, never letting it draw too much attention. To the HOA, it was just part of the scenery. To me, it was leverage. The dam waited, silent, patient, like me, and all it would take was one decision to change everything. The day the final house was finished, the HOA threw a celebration. Bright banners hung across the new street. Music echoed from rented speakers, and the board members strutted around like royalty surveying their kingdom. They toasted each other with plastic cups of champagne, congratulating themselves for expanding the community, as if they hadn't stolen every square foot of it from me. From my porch, I could see the smug grin on the president's face, the way he shook hands with the developer, the way he pointed at my home like it was already next on his list. They believed they had won, but deep inside, I knew their victory was built on hollow ground. Every brick, every wall, every shiny new roof sat on land they had no right to claim, and all of it depended on one thing they had forgotten: the water. The dam was still mine. It was the one piece of control they couldn't touch, no matter how many court papers or fines they buried me under. For months, I had kept quiet, watching, waiting, letting them pile arrogance on top of arrogance. And now, standing at the edge of the dam as the sun sank into a blood-red horizon, I realized the moment had come. The reservoir behind me shimmered with quiet power, the waterline higher than it had been in years thanks to weeks of steady rain. Below, the neat little houses lined the valley floor like toys waiting to be swept away. For a moment I hesitated. This wasn't just revenge, it was a reckoning. If I opened the dam, there would be no going back. The HOA would lose everything they had built on my land, their homes, their pride, their illusion of control. And in that destruction, I would reclaim the power they thought they had stripped away from me. As I gripped the wheel that controlled the gate, flashes of their cruelty flooded my mind. The fines, the harassment, the laughter at my pleas, the bulldozers tearing through my fields as if my history meant nothing. Their voices echoed in my head, mocking, belittling, erasing me. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with a release I had been holding back for far too long. Then I turned the wheel. The metal groaned as the gate shifted, and a deep rumble filled the air. At first, it was just a trickle, a whisper of water rushing forward. But within seconds, the trickle became a roar. A wall of water surged through the spillway, crashing down the valley with unstoppable force. I stood there as the ground shook beneath me, as the water consumed the creek and swelled beyond its banks, racing toward the development below.